The knock came just after sunset, 3 sharp hits that made my stomach drop. When I opened the door, my father stood there, rain dripping from his coat. "You're alone, Maya. No husband, no children. We're taking this house." Behind him, my brother smirked, my mother clutching a box labeled master bedroom. The same family who once threw me out into a storm when I was jobless now wanted everything I'd built. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just looked at them, calm, steady, and reached for my phone. What happened next? None of them ever saw coming. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed on Saturdays and everyone waved, but never really looked. My father, Thomas, worked as a branch manager for an insurance company. He liked order numbers and control. My mother, Linda, was an accountant who lived for appearances, fresh flowers on the counter, matching Christmas pajamas every year, a perfectly curated version of family love. And then there was Jason, my older brother by 3 years, the golden child. Everything he touched was promising. He was the reason my father bragged at barbecues, and my mother smiled for photos. I was different, quieter, more careful. I liked sketching designs on my old Dell laptop building pretend websites that no one would ever see. I wasn't lazy. I just saw beauty in things that didn't have price tags. At 16, while Jason took summer trips to Myrtle Beach, I stocked shelves at Target, saving every paycheck in a coffee tin labeled college fund. I thought they'd be proud. Every Sunday, we had dinner together, roast chicken, green beans, and my father's sermons about success. I still remember the night I told them I wanted to study web design. I'd practiced the sentence all week. "Web design," my father repeated, setting down his fork. "That's not a real career, Maya." My mother laughed softly. "Sweetheart, people like you end up freelancing forever. Study finance. Something practical." Jason snorted. "Better hope Target needs a website." Their laughter filled the room, warm and cruel. I laughed too, pretending it didn't sting, but my hands were trembling under the table. That night, I packed away my sketchbook and stared at the glow of my computer screen. I told myself I'd prove them wrong someday. When I turned 18, they bought Jason a brand new Ford Fusion for his birthday. My father tossed me a card with $50 inside. "Get yourself something useful," he said. I used it to buy a used textbook for my design class at the community college. Those first 2 years were brutal. I worked double shifts at a diner and pulled all-nighters studying code. I'd come home to my tiny apartment smelling like burnt coffee and fryer oil, collapse on the couch, and open my laptop again. No one called. No one asked if I was eating. But my grandmother, Dorothy, did. She lived in a small town across the state line and called every Sunday. "You've got your grandfather's patience," she used to say. "Don't let them shrink you, honey." During summer breaks, while Jason traveled to Cancun with my parents, I spent my days helping Grandma in her garden, painting her fence, fixing her old computer, listening to stories about how she'd built her own house brick by brick after my grandfather died. She was the first person who told me independence wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. I graduated from the State University at 22. No ceremony, no family in the audience, just me holding my diploma in a plastic sleeve outside the registrar's office. That same week, I landed a junior designer job at a small digital agency downtown. My starting salary was nothing impressive, but it was mine. I sent my parents a card that said I got the job and included a photo of my first desk secondhand, cluttered but glowing under a cheap desk lamp. They never replied. Years later, I'd look back at that photo and realize that was the moment I truly left home. Not the night I moved out, but the night I stopped waiting for them to see me. Back then, I still believed family could learn to change. I just didn't know yet how far they'd go to prove me wrong. Jason's success was the family's favorite story to tell, even when it wasn't true. My father kept a framed photo of him shaking hands with some college dean, like proof of his destiny. Every phone call, every holiday card from my parents included his latest achievement. When I got promoted at the agency, I called to share the news. My mother answered, distracted. "That's nice, dear. Jason just got accepted into an MBA program." The pride in her voice cut deeper than the words. Jason never called me. When he did text, it was for favors. "Hey, can you fix my resume or design me a logo for my startup?" I helped, hoping maybe it meant something. It didn't. The distance between us grew quietly like dust. No one bothers to clean. During one Christmas visit, my father poured wine and made another toast to Jason. To the one carrying the Thompson legacy forward. Jason grinned. My mother leaned over to him and whispered, "You've always been the one." They thought I didn't hear. I told myself it didn't matter, but every little thing reminded me I was the extra. Jason's room was still a shrine, trophies, photos, medals, all dusted weekly. My childhood room had become a storage closet. My name was barely on the mailbox anymore. I tried harder, thinking effort could buy affection. I sent gifts on birthdays, helped them file their taxes, even drove 3 hours once when their Wi-Fi router broke. No one thanked me. My mother just said Jason would have fixed it faster. At 27, I'd spent 5 years at the same agency. I had experienced stability, but not the validation I still somehow wanted. Then everything collapsed at once. The company went bankrupt overnight. Locked doors, silent phones, no warning. My final paycheck bounced. I told myself it was temporary. I polished my portfolio, applied to every open position, and counted savings. But the months slipped by. Rent came due. My roommate moved out. The apartment felt like an echo chamber. The night before eviction, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes. My laptop glowed with unpaid bills. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my landlord. No one else. That's when I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I called home. "Dad," I started, voice shaking. "I lost my job. I need help, just a loan for rent. I'll pay it back." He sighed, long and tired. "Actions have consequences, Maya. You chose a field with no future." "Please," I whispered. "It's just $2,000. Just until next month." My mother's voice came through, distant but sharp. "We can't help you. We're paying for Jason's MBA. You need to learn responsibility." Then the line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, hearing the rain start outside soft at first, then harder. I drove to their house that night anyway. The lights were on. My father opened the door just enough for the porch light to hit his face. "Dad, please, just for a few weeks." "No," he said. "You made your choices. Live with them." My mother appeared behind him. "This isn't a good time, Maya." The door closed. The rain soaked through my coat as I stood there clutching my bag. My breath came out in white clouds, and for a long minute, I didn't move. Then I walked back to my car, dripping, shaking, numb. That was the last night I ever called them family. I spent the next week living out of my car behind a Walmart. The heater barely worked, so I wrapped myself in an old blanket and tried to sleep through the hum of delivery trucks. I showered at a gym using a day pass and charged my phone at coffee shops. I told myself it was temporary, but every rejection email made the silence louder. One afternoon at Starbucks, I sat hunched over my laptop applying for jobs I didn't even want. "Maya," a voice said. I looked up. Carla, an old high school friend, stood there, her eyes softening as she took in my appearance. "Are you okay?" she asked. I tried to lie, but my throat closed. Tears came before words. Carla didn't ask again. She just said, "Come with me." Her spare bedroom felt like heaven, a real bed, warm sheets, the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. The next morning she made calls and got me an interview at her boyfriend's design studio. His name was David. He looked over my portfolio and said, "You've got an eye for detail. Start Monday." It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. I worked late, skipped lunches, and said yes to every project. After months of humiliation, I finally felt useful again. 2 weeks in, David called me into his office. "You're good at this," he said, smiling. "Let's bump your pay." For the first time in months, I exhaled without guilt. Then the phone rang. "Is this Maya Thompson?" a woman asked. "Your grandmother's neighbor, Margaret. Dorothy's in the hospital. It's serious." The world narrowed. Grandma Dorothy, my only real family, had pneumonia. Carla drove me the 3 hours to the hospital. When I walked into the room, Grandma looked small under white sheets, her voice thin but steady. "You came," she whispered. "I tried to call," I said, gripping her hand. "I know." She smiled weakly. "You always try." 3 days later, she handed me a thick envelope from her bedside drawer. Inside, keys, papers. "The cottage. It's yours now. Grandma, please don't talk like that. I built that home to protect what matters. Now it's your turn." That night she passed away while I held her hand. At the reading of her will, my parents and Jason sat across from me, faces tight. The lawyer read aloud, "To my granddaughter, Maya Thompson, I leave my cottage and savings." The silence that followed was thunderous. My father stood. "Unacceptable. That house should be ours." The lawyer remained calm. "Mrs. Dorothy's wishes are legally binding." My mother snapped. "She manipulated her. My own daughter." I met her eyes. "You never visited her." "I did," Jason muttered. "You don't deserve it." I rose slowly, sliding the keys into my pocket. Grandma thought I did. Then I left the room. By sunset, I stood before the cottage, peeling paint overgrown garden windows clouded with dust. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and whispered to the empty air, "I finally have a home." The cottage needed everything. Paint, plumbing, insulation, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I woke up surrounded by silence that was mine. The floors creaked under my feet like an old song. I painted the walls pale cream planted flowers Grandma loved and turned the spare bedroom into a workspace. David let me work remotely, and by night, I freelanced for small businesses that couldn't afford big agencies. I slept little, but every morning smelled like coffee and freedom. A year later, I registered my own studio, Horizon Creative. The name came from Grandma's favorite saying, "Keep your eyes on the horizon, not the storm." Clients started coming through word of mouth, a bakery, a bookstore, a small hotel by the lake. I didn't advertise. I didn't need to. Hard work spoke louder than family names ever could. Ryan Anderson walked in on a Wednesday. He owned the bookstore downtown. "I need a rebrand," he said, half smiling. His voice was calm, his handshake firm, the kind of man who looked you in the eye and meant it. I designed his logo, redid his website, and somehow we just never stopped talking. Dinner meetings became real dinners. Months turned into years. I wasn't looking for love, but it found me anyway. By 32, Horizon Creative had 3 employees and steady clients. I worked from the converted garage, Ryan helped in the garden on weekends, and every evening we ate under the old oak tree Grandma planted. My life wasn't flashy, but it was whole. Then one Thursday, my phone buzzed. Jason. 5 years of silence. Then, "Hey Maya, heard your business is doing great. Would love to reconnect." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Reconnect. That word stung. I answered anyway. "Jason." "Hey little sis," he said, too cheerful. "We've been thinking about you. Maybe we could visit wee Mom, Dad, and me. Just for the weekend." My pulse quickened. "Fine," I said. "Saturday. Just a visit." Saturday arrived wrapped in unease. Their car crunched down my gravel driveway. My father stepped out first, smiling too wide. My mother carried store-bought pastries. Jason wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy. They toured the house like buyers inspecting property. "You've done well," my mother said, tone sweet but sharp, "for someone with no husband or children." "Thank you," I replied flat. Lunch was quiet until my father cleared his throat. "This house is too big for one person. Don't you think it's wasteful?" "What are you suggesting?" "We could move in," he said, matter of fact. "Your mother and I would take the master bedroom. Jason could use the office for his business." I set my fork down. "You can't be serious." Jason leaned back. "We're family, Maya. You owe us some space." "Owe you?" My voice cracked into a laugh. "Like I owed you when I begged for help and you left me in the rain." My father's face tightened. "That was different." "No," I said. "It wasn't." I stood shaking but steady. "Get out," my mother tried to soften it. "You're being emotional. We just want to help get out." They left with stiff backs and forced smiles, but something in my father's eyes warned me it wasn't over. 3 weeks later, Ryan and I drove to Chicago for a design conference. Second morning there, a text from Margaret Grandma's old neighbor, Maya. "There are people at your house. I saw them carrying boxes inside." My chest went cold. I opened the Ring app, my father at the back door, tool in hand, prying the lock. My mother behind him, Jason hauling suitcases. They moved in like they owned the place. I called Jason. "What are you doing?" "We're moving in," he said simply. "This is a family home. You're alone. No husband, no children. You don't need it. You broke in. We have every right. Try to stop us and we'll contest Grandma's will. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. Try me. We drove 4 hours straight home. My home looked different. Curtains drawn lights on their cars in the driveway. Inside, they'd replaced my photos with theirs. My clothes were shoved into boxes. My father turned from the hallway calm as stone. You weren't supposed to be back yet, he said. It's done. I looked around slowly, feeling my pulse steady instead of rise. Is it? He folded his arms. We're taking this house. You can't stop us. I smiled just once and reached for my phone. One call, I said quietly. I dialed 911 with a calmness that scared even me. The dispatcher asked what was wrong. My family broke into my house, I said. I have video proof. Within 20 minutes, 2 police cars rolled up the driveway lights, flashing red across the wet pavement. My father stood at the door, pretending to look confused. This is a misunderstanding, he told the officers. We're her family. I stepped forward, phone in hand. Family doesn't use a crowbar, I said, opening the ring footage. The video played my father prying the lock, Jason hauling boxes, my mother entering behind them. The sound of the latch breaking echoed through the room. The officers' faces hardened. You have 30 minutes to pack your things, one said. If you're not gone by then, you'll be arrested for breaking and entering. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We have nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I replied. My voice didn't shake this time. They scrambled, grabbing clothes, photos, shouting at each other. Jason muttered curses under his breath. My father kept insisting we built this family. I stood by the doorway, silent. Rain began again outside, tapping softly on the roof, just like the night they shut me out. When the last box hit the porch, the officer handed me a report number and nodded. You did the right thing, ma'am. The door clicked shut behind them. The house was quiet again, mine again. I exhaled and looked around scuffed floors, crooked frames, rain streaks on the window. It had never felt so safe. Later, the police confirmed charges against my father and Jason breaking and entering trespassing. They both pled guilty, received suspended sentences, probation. The restraining order kept them 500 feet away. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. And in that silence, I finally heard peace. Months passed. The garden bloomed again, wild and bright. I built a small swing under Grandma's oak tree, the one she planted decades ago. One evening, while Ryan cooked inside, my phone rang an unknown number, Maya. My mother's voice trembled. I heard you got married and that you're expecting. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then softly, thank you. When the call ended, I looked up at the fading light. The same rain that once drowned me now watered everything I'd grown. Peace finally felt like home.
My name is Kelly Robinson, and I'm 32 years old. 4 years ago, I heard the sentence that broke me into pieces. Kelly, I'd rather die than have your children. And today, that man just showed up at my son's first birthday party. It's supposed to be a happy day, balloons, cake, laughter, echoing through the park pavilion. My husband Patrick is helping our son Leo open his gifts, his eyes soft and joyful. And then I see him. Lucas, standing by the parking lot, holding a box wrapped in shiny paper, pretending to smile. My chest goes tight. The sunlight feels suddenly too bright, the noise too sharp. He spots me, starts walking over. I freeze. For a moment, I'm 24 again. Back in that car, staring out the window, while my world collapsed. Flashback, 4 years earlier. Lucas and I met through mutual friends at a friend's rooftop party. He was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who seemed to belong anywhere. I was drawn in instantly the way moths always fly straight into the flame that burns them. He said I had old soul eyes. I thought that was romantic. Later I learned it was just something he said to every woman who looked like she felt too much. We started dating soon after. Lucas was confident, ambitious, always planning his next promotion, next car, next vacation. I was working and publishing, modest but content. He liked to tease me about it. You spend your day editing other people's dreams, he'd laugh. At least someone has to make sure they make sense, I'd reply. My family tried to like him. My mom said he was a little polished. My dad said he had eyes that look past people. But I was in love, or something that felt close enough to it. I believed we were building a life together. I helped him move twice, supported him through a career change, and ignored the unease in my chest every time he rolled his eyes at kids running in restaurants. He'd say, "Why do people bring babies everywhere? They're like little noise grenades." I laughed it off, thought he was joking. You learn to excuse cruelty when you're scared of losing affection. It was a Saturday evening in March when everything shattered. Our friends Dave and Kelly had invited us over to meet their new baby girl. I brought flowers. Lucas brought a bottle of wine he'd bragged about all week. The baby, tiny, warm, so full of life, was fussing in Kelly's arms. She looked exhausted. "Want me to try?" I asked gently. Kelly nodded, grateful. The moment I held that baby, something quiet and sacred passed between us. Her tiny hand curled around my finger and I felt my heart expand. Lucas watched me with that tight smile he wore whenever I was too soft. Dave grinned. "Kelly, you're a natural." Kelly sighed with relief. "She likes you. You're going to be such a good mom someday." The room glowed for me in that second. Warm, hopeful. "I hope so," I said. "I've always wanted a family." And then I made the mistake of looking at Lucas wanting to share that moment. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at his phone, jaw tight, pretending to type something important. When we left a little later, I tried to hold his hand. He pulled it away. The silence in the car was thick. Even the radio static seemed afraid to play. Finally, I asked, "Did something happen? You seemed uncomfortable when I was holding the baby." He didn't look at me. "Can we not do this right now?" "Do what I just thought." He turned then sudden and cold. "Kelly, you want to talk about our future. I'll tell you right now, I'd rather die than have your children." The words hit like a physical blow. I laughed at first, thinking I misheard. "What?" He smirked, cruel. "You and your family, you think small. Suburban mediocrity. Little versions of you running around. No thanks." I could barely breathe. My hands trembled against the steering wheel. He kept talking, voice full of mockery. "Do you even know what it's like to want something more than just diapers and PTA meetings? I'd rather cut my own hand off than live that life." It wasn't just that he didn't want kids. He didn't want my kids. He didn't want me. I remember whispering, barely audible, "You really think that little of me?" He laughed softly, unbothered. "I'm just being honest. You should thank me for that." Honesty, as if cruelty became noble when wrapped in that word. I didn't cry. Not that night. I sat there in silence until the world outside blurred, then said the only thing that made sense. "Okay." He blinked. "That's it, okay." I nodded. "You've said enough." He slammed the door when we got home, muttering something about me being dramatic. I went inside, brushed my teeth, and lay beside him without saying a word. The pillow beneath me was wet by morning. The next few days he pretended it never happened. He brewed coffee, hummed in the kitchen, asked if I wanted Thai or Italian for dinner, as if his words hadn't carved a hole inside me. But something inside had shifted, something final. I started to see everything through a new lens. Every time he dismissed my ideas, every time he rolled his eyes at my dreams, every moment I'd swallowed discomfort because I didn't want to be too sensitive. He hadn't just insulted my future, he'd exposed who he truly was. Back to the present, the birthday party. Lucas is only a few steps away now. The same carefully styled hair, but thinner. Eyes duller. A smile rehearsed too many times in the mirror. He lifts the box slightly. "I brought something for Leo." My heartbeat pounds in my ears. "You shouldn't be here, Lucas." His smile falters. "I just wanted to," but I don't hear the rest. The sounds fade again. The laughter, the music, Patrick's voice calling my name. Because in my mind, I'm still sitting in that car 4 years ago, hearing the echo of his voice, the one that told me I was unworthy of love, of motherhood, of joy. Only now the difference is clear. He was wrong. I have all of it, and more. The woman I used to be died that night, but the one who rose from her ashes, she built a life he could never imagine. The morning after that night, sunlight spilled across our apartment like it always did, warm and golden, pretending everything was still okay. Lucas was in the kitchen, whistling. The smell of coffee filled the air, that same vanilla roast I used to love. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Morning, you want toast?" As if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't gutted me with words I could never unhear. I sat there at the table, staring at him. The man who had just told me that the idea of having my children disgusted him was now buttering toast. The world tilted a little that morning. I realized something cruel and liberating at once. He didn't regret saying it. He just didn't care. That week, he was unusually cheerful, cracking jokes, making plans, even sending me links for vacations we'd once dreamed of taking. It was like watching a stranger play a role that used to belong to someone I loved. But every sound, every laugh felt hollow. The silence after his voice was louder than any argument. I went to work, but the words on the page blurred. I'd edit entire paragraphs and not remember a single sentence. My coworkers noticed. My boss asked if I was sick. I wasn't sick, I was disappearing. At night, I'd lie awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship like a crime scene. The little things I'd once thought were quirks now looked like warning signs. How he'd always corrected me in public. How he'd joke about my sentimental little dreams. How he'd sigh when I talked about my family. And yet I'd loved him. I'd believed I was lucky to have someone driven. It took me years to realize being loved by someone who looks down on you is just another way of being alone. One Thursday evening, Lucas went out for drinks with his coworkers. He didn't notice the packed suitcase in the corner. I spent that night folding what little dignity I had left into a single bag. I took my clothes, my old journals, my grandmother's ring. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the dishes could stay. They belonged to a version of me I no longer wanted. Before I left, I placed a note on the kitchen counter. It said only, "I hope you find what you're chasing." I locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the keys. When the elevator doors closed, I let myself cry for the first time. Quietly. No screaming, no dramatic sobs, just the sound of something fragile snapping in half. The next few months were strange. Silence, then noise, then silence again. Lucas called from different numbers, left voicemails. "We should talk. You're overreacting. I didn't mean it like that." I didn't answer any of them. I'd already heard everything that mattered. Mutual friends asked what happened. I said simply, "We wanted different things." That was true. I wanted a future built on love. He wanted a mirror that never showed him his flaws. Loneliness has a particular sound. It's the hum of your own breathing in a quiet apartment. The echo of your footsteps when no one answers your "I'm home." But it's also where healing begins. I started going to therapy. At first, I hated it. I hated talking about him, hated remembering how small I'd become. But every week, my therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Patel, helped me peel back another layer of pain. One day, she asked, "Do you think he broke you, or do you think he revealed where you were already cracked?" That question sat with me for weeks. Because she was right, Lucas hadn't created my insecurities. He'd only found them and used them as mirrors. I began rebuilding, slowly, deliberately. I started jogging at dawn, the hour when the city still slept and the world belonged only to the stubborn and the lost. I bought myself flowers every Friday. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed away during the Lucas years. One night, I went to an open mic with my best friend Mia. She dragged me out of the house, claiming I needed noise therapy. Halfway through the event, I found myself smiling. The laughter around me felt real for the first time in months. When I got home that night, I played my old acoustic guitar, the one Lucas used to mock. My fingers were rusty, but the sound was soft and steady like breathing again after being underwater too long. 8 months passed. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, everything changed again. I was in a small bookstore downtown browsing the philosophy section, something I hadn't done in years. My hand hovered over a copy of Beyond Good and Evil when a voice behind me said, "Be careful." That book made me want to throw it out the window. I turned. A man stood there, messy hair, gentle smile eyes that looked curious instead of calculating. "You've read it?" I asked. Tried to, failed gloriously. I laughed, and it surprised me how natural it felt. We talked for almost 2 hours about books, travel, childhood, everything. His name was Patrick. He was a civil engineer who built community centers and bridges for a living, literally making connections. When I told him I worked in publishing, he said, "So you make the world sound better, and I just make sure it doesn't collapse." He wasn't trying to impress me. He was trying to know me. And for the first time, that was enough. That night, I sat by my window holding a cup of tea, thinking about him. I realized something simple, something I wish I'd known years earlier. Love isn't supposed to make you feel like you're walking on eggshells. It's supposed to make you feel like coming home. I didn't know it then, but meeting Patrick wasn't an accident. It was the universe's quiet way of saying, "Now that you've learned what love isn't, let me show you what it could be." Love didn't rush back into my life. It tiptoed. Patrick and I started as friends. There was no spark that burned too bright, no dizzying chaos like with Lucas. Just peace. And that I realized was rarer than passion. He texted occasionally, book recommendations, random jokes, photos of bridges he'd designed. I'd reply with sarcastic comments or quotes from novels. It was easy, natural. A month later, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee. He showed up 5 minutes early with 2 drinks in hand. I didn't know what you liked, so I guessed. Vanilla latte, right? How did you... You look like someone who finds comfort in the familiar. That line stayed with me for weeks, not because it was romantic, but because it was true. We saw each other more after that. Farmers markets, art exhibits, long walks through the city. He'd tell me about growing up with 3 brothers. I'd tell him about being an only child with too many books and a mother who collected seashells. He listened, really listened. The first time I told him about Lucas, not in detail. Just the broad strokes. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. He just said quietly, "I'm sorry he made you question your worth." No grand gestures, no promises, just empathy. It was strange how healing could sound like silence instead of speeches. One rainy afternoon, we ended up stuck inside a small diner during a thunderstorm. Patrick stirred his coffee, watching lightning flash through the windows. "You ever think about the future?" he asked. I laughed softly. "After the last few years, not really. I'm kind of figuring out who I am again." He smiled. "Good. That means you're not rushing. The right things don't need chasing." Then quietly, almost like an afterthought, "For what it's worth, I think you'd make an incredible mom someday." The world seemed to go still. My breath caught. The last time someone had talked about me being a mother, it ended with cruelty. This time the words felt like sunlight after a storm. I didn't respond right away. Just looked at him. He didn't flinch, didn't retract what he said. He just smiled, gentle and patient, letting me sit with it. That was the moment something inside me began to thaw. Months passed. What started as casual companionship turned into something deeper, an affection that grew in the quiet, in the small details. Patrick always remembered the things I never said twice. He'd text, "Remember to eat before editing marathons," or show up with chamomile tea when I was overwhelmed. He wasn't the kind of man who swept you off your feet. He was the kind who made sure you landed safely. And maybe that's what I'd needed all along. One weekend, he invited me to help babysit his niece and nephew, 2 tiny whirlwinds named Max and Sophie. We spent the afternoon building pillow forts and eating ice cream straight from the tub. At one point, Max fell asleep in my lap, and I caught Patrick watching me. Not with amusement, but with something softer, deeper. "You're really good with them," he said quietly. I smiled, brushing Max's hair off his forehead. "Kids are honest. You can't fake love with them." Patrick nodded. "That's what I like about you. You don't fake anything." That night, as we cleaned up the mountain of toys, he turned to me suddenly. "You know, I think love is a bit like parenting. You show up, you listen, you keep showing up even on the hard days." It wasn't a confession, but it felt like one. We didn't label things right away, but love has its own rhythm. It doesn't need permission to grow. 3 months later, he officially asked me to be his girlfriend. We were sitting in the park, the air thick with the smell of jasmine and rain. He looked nervous. I teased him. "Patrick, you build bridges for a living. I think you can handle asking a question." He laughed. Then softly, "Kelly, will you build one with me?" That was the first time I realized he wasn't offering me escape. He was offering partnership. 6 months later, he proposed. No fancy dinner, no fireworks, just a quiet hike up our favorite hill. The wind tangled my hair as he held out a simple ring. "No speeches," he said, smiling. "Just this, will you marry me?" I didn't even let him finish the sentence before whispering, "Yes." Our wedding was small. My parents, his family, a few close friends. I remember standing there holding his hands thinking, "This is what safety feels like?" During the vows, he said, "You've taught me that love isn't loud, it's consistent." And I knew then that I'd never have to beg to be understood again. We moved into a small house with creaky floors and a backyard big enough for dreams. We painted the walls together, argued over curtain colors, laughed until midnight over burnt pasta. One night lying in bed, he asked, "Do you ever think about kids?" I hesitated, old fears bubbling up, but then I saw his expression. Not pressure, not expectation, just curiosity. "Yes," I whispered. "I always have." He smiled. "Good, because I can't wait to meet them someday." That was the moment the past lost its power over me. Because someone finally looked at me and saw not a burden, not suburban mediocrity, but a woman worthy of love and legacy. I fell asleep that night with his arm draped across me and a thought that felt like a promise. Maybe love doesn't need to burn. Maybe it just needs to stay. When I found out I was pregnant, I cried. Not because I was scared, but because it felt like the world was finally giving me back everything I thought I'd lost. I still remember the moment the faint pink line on the test, my trembling hands. The sound of the clock ticking too loudly in the bathroom. Patrick was outside watering the plants. I walked out, barely breathing, holding the test behind my back. He turned, smiling. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I whispered. "A miracle." When I showed him the test, he froze for half a second, then laughed a sound so full of joy it made my knees weak. He lifted me into his arms, spinning me around like we were kids. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He laughed and cried at the same time, and I realized then this was what love looked like when it was real. Pregnancy changed everything. Patrick went to every appointment, asked the doctor. Too many questions, read parenting books before bed. He'd put his ear on my belly every night and talk to the baby. "Hey, little one, this is your dad. I hope you like bad jokes." I'd laugh and say he or she's probably already rolling their eyes. When we painted the nursery, we argued over shades of yellow. He wanted sunrise gold. I said soft butter. We compromised with something in between. The walls glowed like morning light. We took birthing classes, practiced breathing, and joked about how unprepared we probably were. But underneath it all was a kind of peace, a shared certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. When our son was born, I thought I understood love. But then I saw him tiny, red-faced, crying, like his lungs were too small to hold all that life, and my heart cracked open wider than I knew it could. Patrick cut the cord, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He's perfect, Kelly." We named him Leo after my grandfather, but also because it means brave. It felt right he was our new beginning, our courage made flesh. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I thought about the night Lucas told me he'd rather die than have my children. For a moment, I saw his face in my memory, the sneer, the disgust, and then I looked down at Leo, warm and blinking up at me, and I realized how wrong Lucas had been. Because this tiny heartbeat pressed against my chest was the most beautiful thing I'd ever made. "You were wrong," I whispered to the ghost of him. "You'll never know what this feels like." The months that followed were exhausting and euphoric. We survived sleepless nights, diaper disasters, and colic cries. But Patrick never complained. He'd wake up at 3 a.m., stumble to the crib, and whisper stories to Leo about the constellations, about bridges and bravery. Sometimes I'd wake up and find them both asleep in the rocking chair. Patrick's head tilted back, Leo's tiny hand resting on his chest. Those were the moments I wished I could freeze forever. One afternoon when Leo was 6 months old, I got a message request on Facebook. The name made my heart stop. Lucas Matthews. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought he'd disappeared from my world for good. The message was short. "Congratulations. I heard you had a baby. He's beautiful. Hope you're well." I stared at it for a long time. The words were polite, harmless. But underneath I could feel the weight of something else, nostalgia, maybe regret. I didn't respond. I blocked the account. But that night, as I rocked Leo to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why now? After 4 years. After all the silence. It wasn't guilt that rose in me. It was pity. For someone who only realized the value of love after it was gone. A few weeks later, my friend Mia called. "You'll never guess who I ran into," she said. "Don't tell me Lucas. He asked about you. Said he heard you got married, had a baby. He looked different. Kind of lost." I didn't know what to say. Mia continued. "He said he's trying to start a family now, but it hasn't been easy." The words hung there between us. For a long moment, I said nothing. "I hope he finds what he's looking for," I finally said. "You don't sound angry." "I'm not." He gave me the map to the life I was meant to build by showing me what I didn't deserve. One evening, Patrick caught me standing in the nursery staring at Leo sleeping in his crib. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." About him, I looked up surprised. "How did you—" He smiled softly. "You get quiet when your past tries to talk." I nodded. He reached out. I didn't reply. Patrick came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Good, because the only people who matter are already right here." I turned and kissed him, feeling Leo's soft breaths fill the silence. He was right. My life wasn't missing anything. But peace is fragile, and some ghosts don't like to stay buried. A month later, while grocery shopping with Leo, I heard someone call my name. "Kelly." My blood ran cold. I turned, and there he was. Lucas. Older, thinner, dressed too neatly, as if trying to armor himself in confidence. "It's been a while," he said, forcing a smile. "Yes, it has." His eyes fell on Leo, sitting in the cart, babbling and chewing on his toy giraffe. "Is this your son?" "Yes. His name's Leo." He swallowed hard. "He's beautiful. He looks like you." For a moment, I thought he might mean it kindly, but then I saw something flicker behind his eyes, regret, envy, loss. "Thank you," I said simply. We stood there in awkward silence, surrounded by cereal boxes and checkout beeps. Finally, he said quietly, "I'm trying to have kids now. It's been hard." I nodded politely. "I'm sorry to hear that." And I meant it, but I didn't offer comfort or friendship or closure. Some stories don't need rewriting, they just need to end. "Take care, Lucas." I pushed the cart forward. Leo laughed, waving his little hand at the man who once said he didn't deserve to exist. I smiled to myself and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, you're right. We don't look back." The day at the grocery store should have been the end, but endings have a way of finding cracks to slip through. A few weeks later, Patrick and I were invited to a summer barbecue at Mia's place, an afternoon filled with laughter, old friends, and Leo toddling around the yard, his cheeks pink from the sun. I was carrying plates to the table when Mia caught my wrist, her smile tightening. "Kelly, don't freak out." "Okay, what's wrong?" "Someone showed up with a date. You might want to brace yourself." I didn't need to ask who. I turned and there he was. Lucas. He was standing across the yard talking to someone from the group. He looked different. Softer maybe, but not in a good way. His eyes carried a weight I hadn't seen before, like someone who'd finally realized he couldn't outrun loneliness. He saw me. His smile froze halfway, then rearranged itself into something polite. Too polite. He walked over careful, cautious. "Kelly. Wow. You look good. Thank you." His gaze shifted to Leo, who was playing with Patrick near the grill. "That's your little boy, yes. That's Leo." Patrick noticed us, gave a small wave, and walked over. His expression was calm but protective, the quiet kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice to set boundaries. "Hey," Patrick said, extending his hand. "You must be Lucas. I've heard your name before." Lucas hesitated, then shook it. "Yeah, old history." "Ancient history," I added softly. Patrick smiled at me, then excused himself to take Leo to the sandbox. That left Lucas and me standing under the shade of the oak tree, the air heavy with things unsaid. He looked down, then said quietly, "You really seem happy." "I am. I've been thinking about us lately, about what I said back then." I stayed silent. "I was stupid, Kelly. I was young, selfish. I thought wanting more meant never settling down. But I see you now, your family, your little boy, and I realize that's the more I was chasing all along." I looked at him, then really looked. The arrogance was gone. What replaced it was hollow. "You said you'd rather die than have my children," I said softly. "Those words don't fade just because you wish they would." He winced. "I didn't mean it. I was scared. You wanted a future I wasn't ready for." "You weren't scared, Lucas. You were cruel. There's a difference." He swallowed hard, voice trembling. "I've changed. Maybe you have. But the woman you broke back then, she changed too. And she doesn't exist anymore." I turned to leave, but he caught my arm gently, not forcefully. His voice cracked. "Do you ever miss what we had?" I didn't even hesitate. "No." He blinked as if he'd expected at least a hint of nostalgia. "What we had wasn't love," I continued. "It was me trying to prove I was enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't." He stepped back, looking away. The sound of laughter from across the yard felt like another world. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he whispered. "Then say it and let it be enough." He nodded, eyes glistening. But as I walked away, I knew it wouldn't end there. Some people mistake guilt for love, and guilt always wants an audience. Later that night, as Patrick and I packed up Leo's toys, I told him what happened. He didn't look angry, just thoughtful. "You okay?" "Yeah, just drained." He apologized. "Good. But you know he's not really saying sorry for you. He's saying it for himself." "I know." He leaned over and kissed my forehead. "That's the thing about the past, Kelly. It shows up when it realizes it doesn't belong anywhere else." I smiled faintly. "That's poetic. Been reading my books again." "Just stealing your lines," he teased. But I was right, it wasn't over. 2 weeks later, I saw a familiar car parked across from our house. Same make, same color. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But it happened again. Different days, different hours. Patrick noticed. "You think it's him I don't know?" We didn't confront him. We didn't need to. Some ghosts disappear faster when they realize they're not being chased. Still, something in me stirred. That old ache, the feeling of being watched, judged. I'd worked so hard to bury it, but Lucas's presence, even from a distance, made it twitch again. Then came Leo's first birthday. The day everything came full circle. We planned a small gathering at the community center near our house. Family, close friends, laughter echoing through the hall. Patrick was outside setting up the grill. I was arranging cupcakes shaped like tiny suns. For once, life felt perfectly ordinary, the kind of ordinary I used to dream about. Then I saw a familiar car pull into the parking lot, and the ghost stepped out again, this time holding a gift bag. "Lucas." My hands froze over the cupcakes. Patrick noticed instantly. "Do you want me to handle it?" he asked softly. "No," I said, my voice steady. "This is mine to finish." I walked toward the door, my pulse steady, my mind quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel fear, just finality. He saw me and smiled that same nervous grin I'd seen the first time we met. Hi, Kelly. I brought something for Leo. You shouldn't be here. I just wanted to wish him happy birthday. He's 1-year-old Lucas. He doesn't know you, and I intend to keep it that way. His mask cracked. The exhaustion in his eyes told me he'd been rehearsing this moment, hoping for redemption. I know I hurt you, he said, voice breaking. But I've changed. I want the things you wanted. A family, a child, love. Then build it with someone else. No one wants me. I keep trying, but... He stopped, choking on the truth. I'm running out of time. I stared at him, at the man who once made me believe I was unworthy of love, and I realized how small he'd become. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said quietly, but that has nothing to do with me anymore. His eyes shimmered with tears. Kelly, please. I was an idiot. You were the one, the only person who ever actually loved me. No, Lucas, I loved who I thought you could become, but that man never existed. I turned toward the door. Goodbye, Lucas. Behind me, I heard his breath hitch the soft scrape of a shoe against gravel, but I didn't turn back. Because I had already faced my past, and I had nothing left to prove. I didn't look back as I walked toward the building. The sound of Lucas's car door slamming behind me felt like punctuation, a sharp period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. Inside, the air smelled of frosting and laughter. My mom was helping Patrick set up decorations while Leo babbled in his high chair, smearing icing on his cheeks like war paint. Patrick looked up as soon as he saw my face. Everything okay? I smiled, though my hands were still trembling faintly. Perfect, I said, and for once it was true. He came closer, brushing a stray hair from my face. He's gone. Yeah, probably for good this time. Patrick's hand lingered against my cheek. Then let's not waste another second thinking about him. I nodded. He was right. Lucas belonged to another lifetime, one I'd already buried and mourned. As the guests gathered, I caught myself watching Leo more than anyone else. The way he laughed when my dad blew bubbles, the way his tiny fingers grabbed frosting and offered it to me like a gift. It was in those small moments that everything I'd fought for made sense. I'd once begged someone to imagine a future with me. Now I was living inside one, and it was better than anything I dared to dream. Later that evening, after the candles were blown out and Leo had demolished his cake, the guests slowly trickled out. My mom kissed me on the forehead before leaving. You did good, sweetheart, she whispered. You built the life you deserve. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, Patrick and I sat on the floor, surrounded by wrapping paper, half-eaten cupcakes, and the faint hum of a lullaby from Leo's baby monitor. He glanced at me. You want to talk about what happened outside? I hesitated, then nodded. He said he's changed. Said he wants the things I have now. Patrick sighed, leaning back against the wall. People like him always want what they can't have, especially when they realize it was never about the things. It was about the heart behind them. He said he's running out of time. Patrick looked at me, his eyes soft but steady. Maybe he is, but that's not your burden to carry. I smiled faintly, my throat tight. I know. We cleaned up in silence, the kind that feels warm rather than awkward. Every few minutes, Patrick would hum some silly tune, and I'd laugh. The kind of laugh that comes easily when you're with someone who makes you feel safe. When the last dish was washed and the lights dimmed, I peeked into Leo's room. He was fast asleep, one hand clutching the little stuffed lion Patrick had bought the day he was born. I brushed a kiss on his forehead. Sleep well, my brave boy. Behind me, Patrick leaned against the doorway, smiling. You okay? Better than okay. He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around me. You know, he whispered, watching you handle him today. It reminded me how strong you are. I smiled. I'm not strong, Patrick. I just got tired of breaking. He kissed the top of my head. That's what strength is, Kelly. We walked back to the living room. The leftover cake sat on the table, candles half melted. I picked up one of the smaller ones and relit it, watching the flame flicker gently in the dark. You know what I was thinking earlier, I said. That maybe we should give Leo a little brother or sister someday. Patrick blinked, surprised, then grinned. Really? Really? He pulled me close, his laughter low against my neck. Well, I happen to love that idea. I laughed too, the kind of laughter that feels like sunlight. Much later that night, when the house was quiet and the world outside felt far away, I thought about Lucas one last time. Somewhere he was probably lying awake, replaying all the moments he couldn't fix, the ones that turned to dust, the moment he realized what he'd lost. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't even pity him. Because the truth was simple, he'd already served his purpose in my story. He was the lesson that led me here. I looked around our little home. The toys on the floor, the framed photos on the wall, the soft hum of the baby monitor, and realized that everything I'd ever wanted had quietly become my reality. Not through revenge, not through luck, but through choosing myself one day at a time. I reached for Patrick's hand under the blanket. He murmured sleepily, "What's on your mind?" "Nothing," I whispered, "just gratitude." He smiled without opening his eyes. "Good, keep it that way." I closed mine, letting the quiet settle around us like a promise. Some wounds don't heal because they disappear. They heal because you stop touching them. And as the night wrapped around us, I finally understood the best revenge is peace. My name is Rebecca Hayes, and I'm 29 years old. If you'd asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I would have told you I was building a future with the man I loved, piece by piece, brick by brick. Calvin and I met right after college at a mutual friend's rooftop party. He was all laughter and restless energy, a graphic designer with paint smudges on his fingers, and dreams spilling out of his mouth faster than he could chase them. I was the opposite, an architect who lived by structure and plans. He said my discipline balanced his chaos. I said his chaos made me breathe. Back then, we both thought that was poetry. For 4 years, we were inseparable. We moved into a tiny apartment with creaky floors and a balcony big enough for exactly 2 coffee mugs and a dying plant. I loved that space, not because it was fancy, but because it was ours. I handled most of the bills. He filled the walls with his sketches and made every morning feel like a beginning. When Calvin's freelance jobs dried up, I didn't think twice. I picked up extra design shifts, covered the rent, skipped dinners out, and kept smiling. Love, I thought, was about weathering storms together, and I was proud to be his safe harbor. "Rebecca, you're my anchor," he'd whisper sometimes, wrapping his arms around me after a rough day. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words, they used to feel like forever. By our 4th year, I started saving for something more permanent. I wanted to propose, not because I doubted he would eventually, but because I wanted to. I wanted to be the one who said, "You are home to me." I spent weeks researching rings, something simple, timeless, but full of meaning. I didn't want a grand show, just a promise that felt real. That's when I made my first mistake. I told Lila, my younger sister, about it. Lila had always been my confidant, the kind of sister who raided my closet, borrowed my shoes, and sent me good luck texts before every big meeting. She was spontaneous, radiant, and just a little reckless. Everyone adored her, especially Calvin. But I never saw it as a threat. She was family. We met at our favorite cafe one afternoon. I slid the small velvet box across the table. Her eyes widened, and for a split second I thought I saw admiration. But it was followed by something else, something fleeting and sharp. "Wow," she breathed, touching the box lightly. "He'll love this. It's so you. Safe and elegant." Safe. The word lodged somewhere deep in my chest, but I brushed it off. "I was thinking of proposing this weekend," I said, grinning nervously. "Maybe at our favorite spot by the river." Lila smiled, or tried to. "That's really romantic, Rebecca. I'm happy for you." Yet her tone wavered. Her eyes darted away out the window. I told myself she was just surprised. After all, people still expect the man to propose first. That night when I got home, Calvin was on his laptop humming to himself. I kissed the top of his head, and he smiled, distractedly closing the screen a little too quickly. "Big project," I teased. "Yeah, something for a client," he said without looking up. There was a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering in the air, not mine. But I was tired, and love makes you rationalize the strangest things. The next few days passed in a blur. Work deadlines, late nights, small gestures of affection that felt mechanical. He used to text me random miss you messages during the day. Lately, all I got were busy talk later. Still, I refused to read too much into it. I told myself that long relationships go through quiet phases, that passion evolves, that this was normal. On Friday morning, I packed the ring box into my purse before heading to work. I remember catching my reflection in the mirror, hopeful, nervous, completely unaware that I was about to have my heart dismantled in slow motion. Around noon, I got a text from Lila. "Hey, you still going through with it this weekend?" "Of course," I replied. "Why?" "No reason. Just make sure he's ready." That last sentence sat with me all day. I almost called her to ask what she meant, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. I had everything planned. Dinner reservations, candles, his favorite wine. I even took half a day off work to prepare. But that night when I came home, something in the air felt different. Calvin was sitting on the couch, phone in hand expression unreadable. He didn't greet me, didn't kiss me, didn't even smile. Just looked at me like I was someone he barely recognized. "Hey," I said softly, "everything okay?" He exhaled. "We need to talk." The phrase that never leads anywhere good. I dropped my bag, suddenly uneasy. Talk about what? He leaned back, arms crossed. About us. About where this is going. My heart began to race. What do you mean? He hesitated, then said it like it was nothing. Lila told me about the ring. I froze. What? He smirked faintly. Yeah. She said you were planning something for this weekend. I think it's sweet, Rebecca, but I can't let you embarrass yourself. My pulse roared in my ears, embarrass myself. He shrugged. You're great, but this, he gestured vaguely around the room. This life, it's too predictable, too safe. I need more excitement. Excitement, I repeated numbly. And you think proposing to me would be embarrassing? Calvin looked me straight in the eye. Honestly, yeah. You're amazing, but I've outgrown this. Outgrown us. I stood there unable to breathe. Are you seeing someone else? He hesitated, just long enough for me to know the answer. I swallowed hard. Who is she? He laughed a hollow, cruel sound. You wouldn't understand. Something inside me cracked then. Not loud, not visible, just final. Without another word, I walked to our bedroom, opened the drawer where I'd hidden the ring box, and placed it gently on the coffee table. I hope she's worth it, I said quietly. Calvin didn't reply. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and walked out the door. The click of it closing behind me was louder than any shout. That night, I slept on my friend Maya's couch, staring at the ceiling. Every corner of my mind whispered why. And just as I was drifting into uneasy sleep, my phone buzzed. A message from Lila. Rebecca, please don't hate me. I didn't open it. I just turned the phone face down and let the silence swallow me whole. I woke up the next morning in Maya's apartment with the kind of heaviness that makes even breathing feel like effort. Her cat was curled up by my feet, and sunlight leaked through the curtains, soft, indifferent, and cruelly normal. The world kept moving even though mine had stopped. Maya was in the kitchen, already making coffee. She'd always been the no-questions type of friend. She gave space until I was ready to fill it. But when she saw my face, she didn't need to ask. He cheated, didn't he? She said quietly. I nodded. He didn't say it directly, but I know. With who? My throat tightened. Lila. Even saying it out loud felt unreal, like reciting someone else's story. Maya froze coffee pot midair. Your sister? Yeah. My voice cracked. She was the one who told him about the proposal. She knew what that moment meant to me. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Maya had forgotten to turn off the heat. We both laughed softly at the absurdity, then fell into silence again. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would she... Maya set the pot down, her expression a mix of pity and anger. Because some people can't stand to see others happy, especially the ones closest to them. Her words lingered long after I left her apartment. That day, I avoided going home. I walked for hours through the city, aimless, invisible. I ended up sitting on a park bench, watching strangers live lives that didn't hurt. Couples laughed. Kids chased pigeons. Someone proposed under a blooming jacaranda tree, and the girl said yes, crying and smiling at the same time. It should have made me bitter, but instead it hollowed me out. I wanted that innocence back, the belief that love could be simple. By the time I finally returned to our apartment to grab my things, the air inside felt foreign. Calvin's jacket still hung by the door. His sneakers were kicked off haphazardly near the couch, the same couch where we'd planned movie nights and lazy Sundays. And then there she was, Lila, sitting on the edge of the sofa like she belonged there. Her hair was tousled, her expression guilty, but defiant. Rebecca, I don't. My voice came out sharper than I expected. Don't say anything unless it's the truth. She stood wringing her hands. It just happened? I laughed bitterly. That's what everyone says when they destroy something. It just happened. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean to fall for him. We were just talking one night after one of his shows. I thought he was lonely, and what I interrupted. You decided to comfort him with my life. Please, she whispered. I didn't want you to find out like this. I stared at her. The sister who'd once braided my hair before school, who cried in my lap after her first heartbreak. Now she was standing in my living room, stealing the man I once thought would be my future. You told him about the ring, I said quietly. You knew how much that meant to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought you were rushing him. He told me he wasn't ready. I was trying to protect you. The audacity made my skin crawl. Protect me by betraying me. She flinched. Before either of us could say more, Calvin walked out of the bedroom. He looked startled to see me there, then annoyed. Rebecca, you should have called before coming over. That was the moment I realized he didn't even feel guilty. He'd already rewritten the story in his mind. I was the intruder now. You two deserve each other, I said coldly. I hope the chaos you wanted keeps you warm. I grabbed my suitcase. I had packed it earlier in case I couldn't face returning. On my way out, I paused by the door and turned back. Lila looked at me trembling, searching for forgiveness in my face. She wouldn't find it. Calvin just stared, indifferent, like he was already bored of the drama he'd created. By the way, I said, voice steady now, you were wrong. He frowned. About what? I met his eyes. You didn't outgrow me, Calvin. You shrank. And then I left for good this time. The next few weeks passed in fragments. I moved into a tiny studio across town, nothing more than a bed, a desk, and silence. But that silence became my armor. I deleted Calvin's number, blocked Lila's. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ring box. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was a reminder of how deeply I could trust, and how easily that trust could be broken. Sometimes I'd imagine them together. Did they laugh at me? Did they tell themselves it was destiny? The thoughts would spiral until I forced myself to breathe. I started journaling therapy on paper. I wrote everything I wanted to scream, the humiliation, the betrayal, the rage that simmered beneath my calm. I wrote until my hand cramped and my tears dried. And then slowly something shifted. I began to see the breakup for what it was. Not a punishment, but a release. I had been giving my energy to people who drained me, not deserved me. Maya helped too. She dragged me to yoga classes, made me laugh at ridiculous TikToks, and reminded me that healing isn't graceful, it's messy, loud, and full of relapses. A month later, I started therapy. The counselor, a calm woman named June, told me, "You're allowed to be angry, just don't live there." Her words hit me harder than I expected. So I stopped asking why they did it and started asking why I allowed it to break me so completely. The nights were still long, but less suffocating. I cooked for myself again. I filled my apartment with tiny plants and post-it affirmations. I even laughed one morning when I realized I'd accidentally killed another succulent. For the first time in months, the silence in my home didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like peace. And just when I thought the worst was behind me, that's when their house of cards began to crumble. 3 months. That's how long it took for my tears to run out. Not because the pain was gone, but because I'd finally accepted that crying over people who chose chaos over love was a waste of oxygen. My mornings became a ritual of small victories. Wake up, make coffee, open the blinds, breathe. At first it was mechanical, like following a recovery manual I never signed up for. But slowly that routine began to feel like ownership. My life was mine again, stripped down to silence and sunlight. The studio was modest, a single room with paint-chipped walls and an uneven window latch. But it didn't echo with Calvin's laughter or Lila's voice, just mine, and that was freedom. I spent hours reorganizing my life, deleting old photos, blocking mutual friends who didn't want to take sides, and selling the last of Calvin's art supplies that had somehow ended up in my boxes. Every brush, every pencil gone. It wasn't spite, it was closure. At night, I'd sit by the window with a notebook and pen, journaling whatever floated to the surface. Sometimes it was grief, sometimes anger, sometimes just one sentence. He broke my trust, not my worth. Writing became my therapy before I could afford a real one. Then, one afternoon, as I was leaving work, I saw a message notification from an unknown number. "Hey, Rebecca, it's Lila. Please don't ignore me. I just want to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting it. No reply, no curiosity. Nothing. But that night, another message came. "You don't understand what happened. Calvin needed someone. I was trying to help. It wasn't supposed to go this far." I let out a hollow laugh. They always say that, don't they? It wasn't supposed to go this far, yet somehow it always does. I blocked her again. Weeks passed quietly after that. Work was my distraction. I threw myself into projects, late-night deadlines, coffee-fueled drafting sessions, the satisfaction of structure and numbers. One of my coworkers, a soft-spoken analyst named Daniel, began staying late too. We'd talk about everything but our personal lives, favorite cities, childhood memories, even conspiracy theories about how office coffee was intentionally made bad to keep employees awake. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was safe. A word Calvin despised, but one that now felt sacred. One Friday, Maya convinced me to join her for a weekend photography class. "You need a hobby that doesn't involve spreadsheets," she'd said. So I went. And somewhere between adjusting camera lenses and capturing sunsets through cracked windows, I remembered how it felt to create something beautiful again. Not for anyone else, just for me. Through that lens, I started to see everything differently. pain, betrayal, even loneliness, all of it framed differently when you changed your focus. But peace never lasts long when the past refuses to stay buried. One evening after my photography class, I received a voicemail. Calvin's voice hesitant and low. "Hey, Rebecca. I just wanted to say I hope you're okay. I heard from your mom you moved out. I didn't mean for things to get ugly. Lila and I, well, things have been complicated. I guess I just wanted to check in." Check in. The same man who had crushed me now wanted to check in. I replayed the message twice, not out of longing but fascination. His voice didn't sound confident anymore. There was strain in it, exhaustion, maybe even regret. I deleted it without saving. But the timing felt poetic, because the very next day, Maya called, voice buzzing with disbelief. "Rebecca, you won't believe this. Calvin and Lila. Let me guess I interrupted their moving in together. Not exactly. They're falling apart." I didn't say anything, just let her talk. Apparently, Calvin had quit his design job, something about creative burnout, and was drinking more than working. Lila's friends had stopped speaking to her after rumors surfaced about Calvin flirting with her coworker at a company party. "They're becoming tabloid material," Maya said dryly. Even their mom's embarrassed. I should have felt vindicated, maybe a little satisfaction, but all I felt was tired. Tired of being connected to their chaos, even indirectly. Still that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how fragile their world must be, built on betrayal sustained by denial. There's a saying my therapist would later remind me of. When you steal someone's peace, you inherit their storms. I didn't know it then, but Calvin and Lila's storm was just beginning. 2 weeks later, a mutual acquaintance sent me a message out of nowhere. "Hey, Rebecca, I'm sorry to bring this up, but you were right about Calvin. He's been seeing someone else. And Lila, she's losing it." I didn't respond. I didn't even want the details. But then curiosity, that cursed little ember, pushed me to look. Against my better judgment, I checked Calvin's social media for the first time in months. Gone were the smiling couple photos, the new beginnings captions. His profile was wiped clean. But Lila's page was a different story, a chaos of quotes about heartbreak, betrayal, and self-worth. One caption stood out. "Sometimes you give up everything for love, and love still eats you alive." I sat there, phone in hand, and felt nothing but the quiet satisfaction of distance. They were living the consequences of their own choices, and I was finally living without apology. One evening, after a long day at work, I took a walk by the river, the same place where I'd planned to propose. The sunset reflected on the water like gold dust, and for once it didn't sting to remember. I sat on a bench, camera in hand, capturing the light as it faded. In the distance, a couple laughed, carefree, unburdened. For a fleeting second, I wished I could warn them, be careful what you build your love on. But I didn't. I just took another photo of the moment, the peace, the proof that I'd survived. And for the first time since it all ended, I smiled. Because silence wasn't emptiness anymore, it was strength. I once read that people who betray others always believe they've outsmarted karma. They mistake silence for surrender, thinking the lack of retaliation means they've escaped consequences. But karma doesn't chase, it waits. And it waited beautifully for Calvin and Lila. It started with whispers, the kind that circle through mutual friends long before they hit social media. One afternoon, during a lunch break at work, Maya leaned across the table, eyes wide. "You're not going to believe this," she said, almost gleeful. "Your ex and your sister, they're imploding." I looked up from my salad, completely calm. Imploding how? Apparently Calvin's been drinking too much. Missed 2 client meetings. Lila's freaking out because she's been covering his bills. I blinked. Bills? Yeah. He quit freelancing and said he was starting a creative agency, but it's basically him on the couch watching tutorials and complaining about algorithms. I couldn't help it, I laughed. The irony was almost poetic. The man who once called me boring for having structure was now drowning in his own chaos. Maya grinned. "Girl, you dodged a bullet the size of a bus." But that wasn't the end. It never is. A week later, I got an email from my mom, short and vague. "Lila isn't doing well. She's been distant. Maybe reach out." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew how that story would go. The "your sisters, you should forgive her" guilt trip. The family comes first narrative that always favored the loudest victim. I wasn't going to play that role again. Still, a part of me couldn't help but wonder. So when I ran into an old college friend, Sophie, who also happened to know Calvin, I asked casually, "How are they?" She looked uncomfortable. "You really don't want to know?" I asked. Didn't I? Sophie sighed. He's cheating on her Rebecca, with her coworker apparently. Everyone in their office knows. It's a mess. I paused, letting the words sink in. I should have felt triumphant. I should have thought, good, that's justice. But instead, I felt this deep, hollow ache, because I knew what it felt like to be blindsided by someone you trusted. Does Lila know? I asked. She found out a few days ago, threw his stuff out the window in the middle of the night. Someone filmed it. It's circulating on TikTok. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Of course it was. That's how love stories end these days, not with closure, but with viral humiliation. That evening, as rain hammered against my window, I sat with my thoughts. It was strange seeing my past collapse without me lifting a finger. Once upon a time, I would have been the one begging, crying, bargaining. But now I just watched quietly as the universe balanced its own scales. My phone buzzed, a message from a number I hadn't seen in months. Rebecca, it's me. I don't even know where to start. Calvin cheated on me. With someone from work. He lied about everything. You were right. I didn't reply, but for the first time, I read her words without shaking hands. 5 minutes later, another message came. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I thought I was in love, but he used me. I can't sleep. I hate myself. I sat there staring at the screen until it went dark. Then I typed a single line and deleted it before hitting send. You didn't just lose him, Lila. You lost me too. I didn't know her closure. Weeks passed and more stories surfaced. Calvin had been fired from his latest contract. Lila moved back to our parents' house, avoiding neighbors and family gatherings. Mom called once, her voice tight with disapproval. You could at least talk to your sister, she said. I could, I replied calmly. But I won't. She's your blood, Rebecca. And he was my heart, I said softly. She didn't care then. There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. You've changed. Yes, I said. That's the point. One Saturday morning, I found the old ring box again, the one I'd meant to give Calvin. It had sat untouched in a drawer all these months, a relic of who I used to be. I took it out to the balcony, opened it, and stared at the simple gold band catching sunlight. It wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was proof that I once believed in something pure. And maybe that belief, naive as it was, deserved a better ending. So I slipped the ring into an envelope and mailed it to myself at work with a note, for the woman who learned to choose peace over pain. It arrived 3 days later. I smiled when I opened it, then tucked it into my desk drawer, a personal reminder that some gifts are meant to be kept, even if they were never received. That night, as I walked home, I passed by a cafe where Calvin and I once spent hours sketching dream houses on napkins. It was closed now, boarded up, windows cracked. A for-lease sign hung crookedly on the door. It felt like poetry. Everything we'd built on illusion had finally collapsed. The next morning, I received one more message from Calvin this time. I messed up, Rebecca. I thought I wanted freedom, but I just wanted someone to believe in me again. You were the only one who ever did. I stared at the message, then deleted it. No reply. Because I finally understood you don't owe redemption to the people who destroyed your peace. They were both ghosts now, and ghosts don't deserve the living. That night, as I watched city lights shimmer from my balcony, I realized something profound. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. Their lives were unraveling perfectly on their own. And me, I was finally free enough to stop looking back. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't announce itself. There isn't some cinematic moment where you wake up one morning and say, I'm over it. It happens quietly, in between the coffee you make without thinking of them, the song you can finally listen to again, the name that no longer hurts when someone mentions it. That's where I was when karma came knocking. It started on a gray Tuesday morning. I was leaving a client meeting when my phone buzzed an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Rebecca. The voice was shaky. I didn't recognize it at first. Then I did. Lila. I froze on the sidewalk, the noise of traffic fading around me. What do you want? She let out a breath that sounded like defeat. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to, but I need to say this. I didn't answer. Calvin's gone, she said finally. He left, packed his stuff, and disappeared 2 weeks ago. No note, no explanation, nothing. I felt nothing. Just a quiet, detached pity, not for her, but for the version of myself that once would have cared. Why are you telling me this, Lila? Because I don't have anyone else, she whispered. Mom barely speaks to me. Dad's ashamed. And Calvin, her voice cracked. He took money from me, Rebecca. Thousands. Said it was for his agency. Turns out it was for someone else. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. You chose him over me, I said evenly. Now you're living with the consequences." "I know," she said through quiet sobs, "and I hate myself for it. I thought he loved me. I didn't respond." She kept talking, desperate, spiraling. "I wake up every morning and see your face in my head the way you looked when you left that night. You should have screamed at me. You should have hit me. Anything but walk away like I didn't exist." I took a long pause before answering. "You're right," I said softly. "I should have screamed, but I think silence hurt you more." There was a stunned pause on the line, a realization she couldn't deny. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," she whispered finally. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you were right about everything." And for the first time in months, my voice didn't shake when I replied, "I know." Then I hung up. That night, I went for a walk. The city was bathed in the soft glow of rain-soaked streetlights. I passed by couples holding hands, a man playing guitar near the subway, a little girl in a red coat chasing after her father. It was all ordinary, yet it felt sacred. I thought about how Calvin used to call me boring, how Lila said she needed excitement, and now their excitement had eaten them alive. They'd burned down everything I'd built, but in doing so, they'd freed me from the fire too. 2 weeks later, I ran into Maya at a cafe. She had that look on her face, the one that meant gossip. What I asked, sipping my latte. She smirked. Guess who's back in town trying to fix his reputation? I didn't even have to ask. Calvin. Bingo. Apparently, he'd been kicked out of his latest freelance contract after his client discovered he'd been borrowing assets from other artists. Word spread fast in the design community. His career was crumbling, and no one wanted to work with him anymore. Maya leaned forward, lowering her voice. "He's been telling people that you're the only one who ever believed in him, that he messed up the best thing that ever happened to him." I stirred my coffee slowly. Let him tell his stories. I'm done being a character in them. That weekend, I attended an exhibit for local photographers, something I'd dreamed of since starting my classes. One of my pieces, Stillness, had been selected for display. It was a simple shot, the river at dawn calm and undisturbed, with sunlight breaking through fog. When I walked into the gallery and saw people stopping to look at it, my heart swelled. Not with pride, but peace. Because for the first time in my adult life, something beautiful existed in my world that wasn't tied to someone else's validation. And that's when I saw him. Calvin, standing a few feet away, unshaven eyes sunken. He looked smaller, like someone who'd been living in the shadow of his own decisions. He approached slowly, almost cautiously. "Rebecca," he murmured, "I didn't expect to see you here." I turned perfectly composed. "It's public, Calvin. You're allowed to exist." He gave a dry laugh. "You look different. I am different." He nodded, hands buried in his pockets. "I heard about your exhibit. Congratulations. I always knew you'd do something amazing." For a second, I saw the ghost of the man I used to love, charming, soft-spoken, promising. But ghosts don't stay long. He glanced at the photograph, then back at me. "I miss this version of you, the one who believed in me." I tilted my head, meeting his eyes. "You don't miss me, Calvin. You miss who you were when I loved you." That shut him up. He nodded, stepped back, and muttered, "You deserve better." "I hope you find it." "I already did," I said quietly. As he walked away, I realized something profound. I didn't need to forgive him to be free. I just needed to stop remembering him with pain. That night, I texted Maya one simple line. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes when you stop needing one. She replied with a heart emoji and, "Look at you dropping wisdom bombs like it's poetry night." I laughed for real this time, the kind of laugh that doesn't ache afterward. A few days later, I got another message, this time from Lila. "He's with someone else now. I shouldn't care, but it hurts. I guess this is what I deserve. I hope you're happy, Rebecca." I typed back one final response. "I am." Then I blocked her number for good, because I was finally living the life they both said was too boring. Quiet, stable, peaceful. The kind of life they'd once mocked and now begged for. And in that stillness, I realized something beautiful. Peace isn't boring. It's just something people without it can't recognize. A year had passed since the night everything collapsed, and if you'd told me back then that I'd be here grounded, content, even grateful, I would have laughed. But that's the thing about peace. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It seeps in quietly until one morning you wake up and realize your heart doesn't flinch anymore. My career had flourished. I'd been promoted to lead architect on a new urban renewal project, something that would reshape part of the city's skyline. My work became my anchor again, not a distraction. I traveled, made new friends, and most importantly, learned to enjoy my own company. And somewhere along the way, Daniel, the quiet analyst who used to share late-night office coffee runs, became more than a friend. He wasn't a whirlwind like Calvin. He didn't speak in grand promises or make chaos sound like adventure. He was calm, consistent, real, and after years of equating intensity with love that felt like a revelation. Our relationship grew slowly, like sunlight spreading across a quiet morning, steady, warm, and genuine. One evening, Daniel took me to a small restaurant tucked away downtown. The lights were soft, the music mellow. We talked about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that doesn't need to impress, just connect. At some point, I laughed at one of his dry jokes, and when I looked up, I froze. At the far end of the room, sitting alone at the bar, was Lila. She looked older. Not in age, but in spirit. Her makeup was smudged, her hair unkempt. There was a sadness in her that no amount of apology could erase. She noticed me too. Her eyes widened, disbelief, then shame. Before I could look away, she stood and started walking toward our table. "Rebecca," she said softly, voice trembling, "can I talk to you?" Daniel glanced at me silently, asking if I wanted him to step away. I shook my head. "You can say whatever you need to right here." Lila swallowed hard. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to say this. I lost everything. Calvin. He's with someone else now. Someone younger. My career's gone, my reputation's trashed, and Mom barely speaks to me. I've been living out of a rented room. Her voice cracked, tears spilling. "You were right, Rebecca. You were always right. I thought I was chasing love, but I was just running from myself." Her words hung heavy between us. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, my sister, the girl who once shared a bedroom with me and stole my sweaters, now a stranger hollowed out by her own choices. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "Leela, I hope you find peace, but that peace doesn't live with me anymore." She stared at me, eyes glistening. "I just wanted you to know. I miss you." "I don't," I said quietly. "Not anymore." Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked at Daniel, then back at me, and I saw it, the full weight of her regret crashing in. Then she turned and walked away, shoulders shaking. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand. "You okay?" I nodded, breathing deeply. "Yeah, that was the last ghost." A week later, I heard the final piece of their story. Calvin and Lila's breakup had gone public, messy, humiliating. A mutual friend sent me screenshots I didn't ask for Calvin's new girlfriend, posting cryptic captions about cheaters never change, and Lila commenting underneath with broken heart emojis. It was tragic in a predictable way. But I didn't feel triumphant, just finished. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's watching people fall into the holes they dug for you and realizing you don't even need to look down anymore. That Friday, Daniel surprised me with a weekend trip, a quiet cabin near the lake. The same river, actually, where I'd once planned to propose to Calvin. Life, it seemed, loved full circles. As the sun set over the water, Daniel handed me a small velvet box. My heart skipped. He smiled nervously. "I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to replace anything from your past. I just want to build something new with you, at your pace, no pressure." When he opened the box, I gasped. Not because of the ring, but because it was the same minimalist design I'd once picked out for Calvin. Except this time it didn't feel like a recycled dream. It felt like a healed one. Tears stung my eyes as I nodded. Yes. He slipped the ring on my finger, gentle, certain, real. Months later, at our engagement dinner, the night felt like a movie I'd rewritten for myself. Warm laughter, music, no chaos, no secrets. And for a brief moment, I saw a familiar face near the entrance, Lila again standing outside the restaurant, watching from afar. Our eyes met for half a heartbeat. She smiled faintly, then turned and disappeared into the night. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. Some people are chapters you don't reread, not out of anger, but because you finally learned the story's lesson. As Daniel and I danced under the soft glow of lights, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who thought love was sacrifice, that silence was weakness. Now I knew better. My voiceover would have ended like this. Peace isn't boring. It's the quiet sound of a heart finally beating for itself. The same peace she once called dull became the life she begged for. And with that, the story that once broke me finally let me go.